Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. "Bonnie, darling," Jeanette's voice dripped with false sweetness. "Your father and I are a little concerned." She gestured vaguely towards me with a manicured hand. "About your situation." My father sat across the table, sipping his coffee and avoiding my gaze. I knew this was coming. Ever since I'd lost my job and moved back home, they'd treated me less like a daughter and more like a burden. "Concerned about what exactly?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Shauna placed a sheet of paper on the table. It was a meticulously crafted list, divided into columns and rows. "We've devised a little system," she explained, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "A way for you to contribute, earn your keep." My stomach clenched. "Contribute," I echoed. "I'm looking for a job. I help round the house." My father finally looked up. "It's not enough, Bonnie," he said, his voice flat. "You need to pull your weight." Shauna tapped the paper with a perfectly polished nail. "This is a points system," she explained, as if speaking to a child. "You can earn points by completing chores, contributing financially, things like that." She slid the paper closer to me. I scanned it quickly. Washing dishes 2 points, vacuuming 3, contributing $500 to household expenses 10 points. A separate section detailed how many points were required for meals. Breakfast 5 points, lunch 7, dinner 10. My head spun. "You're joking, right?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Jeanette's smile vanished. "This is your home, Bonnie," she said coldly, "and we expect you to contribute. If you can't, well," she trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "This is ridiculous," I said, pushing the paper away. "I'm your daughter, not a boarder." My father sighed, rubbing his temples. "Don't be dramatic, Bonnie," he said warily. "It's just a way to motivate you. Motivate me to starve. Motivate me to leave. More like," I muttered under my breath. Shauna, however, heard. "Where would you go?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You have no money, no job, no prospects. You're lucky we're letting you stay here." Her words stung, a sharp slap to my already fragile pride. I stood up abruptly, knocking my chair back against the hardwood floor. "Fine," I said, my voice choked with anger and humiliation. "If that's how you want it." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving them sitting there amidst their carefully crafted system of control. I went to my room, slamming the door behind me. The small, sparsely furnished space offered little comfort. It was the same room I'd had as a child, but stripped of its warmth, its personality. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling utterly defeated. How had things come to this? I'd always had a good relationship with my father. Before Shauna, she'd wormed her way into our lives, slowly poisoning everything she touched. Now she was systematically stripping me of my dignity, my independence, even my basic needs. The image of the points sheet flashed in my mind. 5 points for breakfast, 7 for lunch, 10 for dinner. I opened my purse, counting the meager contents. Barely enough for a cup of coffee, let alone a meal that met their ridiculous point requirements. A wave of despair washed over me. I was trapped. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. But even in the depths of my despair, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. This couldn't be the end. I wouldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them starve me, physically or emotionally. I would find a way out. I would find a way to get my life back. I wiped my tears, a new resolve hardening my gaze. I didn't know how yet, but I would make them pay. I would make them regret treating me this way. The memory of a conversation with my father years ago surfaced in my mind. He'd mentioned an offshore account, a nest egg he'd been building for years. He'd said it was for a rainy day, for emergencies. Well, this was an emergency. I knew it was wrong, but desperation gnawed at me. If I could access that account just enough to get back on my feet, I could leave this suffocating house. This twisted game they were playing. It was a risky idea, but the alternative, starving, both physically and emotionally, was worse. I needed to find out more about this account. I needed information, and I knew exactly who to ask. Julian, my ex-fiancé. He'd worked in finance, had a knack for digging up information. We hadn't spoken since the breakup, which had been messy, to say the least. But this was a matter of survival. I grabbed my phone, my hand trembling slightly as I scrolled through my contacts. It felt strange, reaching out to him after all this time. But as I pressed the call button, a sliver of hope pierced through the darkness. Maybe, just maybe, this was the first step towards reclaiming my life. Maybe this was the beginning of my revenge. The Christmas holidays were coming up, a time for family, for joy, for giving. But I had a different kind of gift in mind. A gift for Jana and my father. A gift they would never forget. Rain lashed against the kitchen window, blurring the early morning light into a gray, unforgiving wash. "You're pathetic," Bonnie, Shauna said, her voice as sharp as the knife she used to slice a perfect red apple. "Living under my roof, eating my food, and contributing absolutely nothing." I flinched. Not at the words themselves, I was growing accustomed to her venom, but at the way my own father, sitting across the table with his newspaper, remained silent. He didn't even look up. "It's time you started pulling your weight," Shauna continued, placing the apple, untouched, on a plate in front of her. "This isn't a charity." She slid a piece of paper across the table towards me. It was a typed list, headed with the words "Household Contribution System." "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I picked up the list, my hands trembling slightly. It detailed a point system, assigning points to various chores: washing dishes, vacuuming, laundry. Even making my own bed earned a meager 2 points. "It's how you earn your keep," Shauna said, taking a delicate sip of her coffee. "Every meal requires a certain number of points. Breakfast is 5, lunch is 7, and dinner is 10. She smiled, a thin, cruel smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No points, no food." I scanned the list again. The point values assigned to chores were ridiculously low. Even if I slaved away all day, I doubted I could earn enough points for even a single decent meal. This is impossible," I stammered, my heart pounding in my chest. "Oh, I think you'll find a way," Jeanne purred, her eyes glinting with a malicious satisfaction. "After all, you're so resourceful. Aren't you, Bonnie?" The sarcasm dripped from her words like the rain from the eaves outside. My father finally lowered his newspaper, clearing his throat. "It's for your own good, Bonnie," he said, his voice weak and unconvincing. "It'll teach you responsibility." He didn't meet my gaze. He couldn't. "Responsibility," I repeated, the word catching in my throat. "I lost my job, Dad. I'm struggling. I came here for support, not this." I gestured at the point system, the neatly typed words mocking me. "You could have kept your job if you'd tried harder," Sean interjected, her voice dripping with disdain. "Perhaps this will motivate you to actually find some worthwhile employment." I looked from my father's averted gaze to Jeanette's triumphant smirk. A wave of despair washed over me, colder than the rain outside. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to break me, to punish me. For what? For needing their help, for being vulnerable. I pushed the list away, the paper scraping against the table. "I don't feel well," I mumbled, pushing my chair back. I needed to escape, to get away from their suffocating presence. "Where do you think you're going?" Shauna demanded. "To my room," I whispered, my voice trembling. I could feel their eyes on me, burning into my back as I fled the kitchen. The silence that followed me was heavy, pregnant with unspoken accusations. I closed the door to my small, sparsely furnished room and leaned against it, letting out a shaky breath. The rain continued to fall, a relentless drumming against the window pane. I felt utterly alone, trapped in this house with two people who seemed to revel in my misery. I went to the small, dusty mirror that hung on the wall. My reflection stared back at me, gaunt and pale. My cheeks were hollow, my eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I looked like a ghost of my former self. Jeanette's constant criticisms, the lack of proper food, the relentless emotional abuse it was taking its toll. But as I looked at my reflection, a flicker of something else ignited within me, a small, stubborn spark of defiance. This couldn't continue. I wouldn't let them break me. I would find a way out of this. I would find a way to make them pay for what they were doing to me. I didn't know how yet, but I would. Christmas was just around the corner, a holiday they cherished, filled with their carefully curated image of family bliss. Perhaps, just perhaps, I could find a way to use their own precious holiday against them, a way to shatter their perfect facade and expose the truth of their cruelty. The thought, however fleeting, gave me a sliver of hope, a small, fragile ember in the cold, damp darkness of my despair. Rain lashed against the window pane, mirroring the storm raging inside me. Another day, another tally of insufficient points. "Not enough for dinner," Bonnie Jeanette's voice, laced with fox sympathy, cut through the quiet hum of the refrigerator. "Perhaps tomorrow you'll manage to earn your keep." My stomach growled, a hollow ache that resonated with the emptiness in my heart. I'd spent the entire day scrubbing floors, washing windows, even reorganizing Jeanette's overflowing closet tasks she'd assigned with a saccharine smile, knowing full well they wouldn't accumulate enough points for a proper meal. But I cleaned the entire house. I protested weakly, my voice barely a whisper. My father, sitting passively in his armchair, pretended to be engrossed in his newspaper, a familiar shield he used to avoid conflict. He didn't even glance up. "The point system is the point system," Bonnie Shauna said, her tone hardening. "Rules are rules." She closed the refrigerator door with a decisive click, the sound echoing the finality of her judgment. I retreated to my room, the small space offering little comfort. It was once a sanctuary filled with childhood memories. Now it felt more like a prison cell. The gnawing hunger pangs were a constant reminder of my diminished status in this house. My own home. I collapsed onto the lumpy mattress, the springs groaning beneath my weight, or rather, the lack of it. My clothes hung loose on my frame, a testament to the meager portions I'd been surviving on for weeks. I hadn't realized how thin I'd become until I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the dusty mirror hanging on the wall. My cheekbones protruded sharply, my eyes sunken and shadowed. I looked like a ghost of my former self. The realization sent a wave of despair washing over me. This wasn't me. This wasn't the life I'd envisioned for myself. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure up images of a different time, a happier time. I remembered the excitement of landing my first job after college, the pride in my voice when I told my parents I'd be able to support myself. Then the company downsized, the unexpected layoff, and the shame of having to return home, tail between my legs. I thought I'd find comfort and support here, a temporary haven until I got back on my feet. Instead, I'd walked into a meticulously crafted trap, a twisted game orchestrated by Jeanne. The point system, she'd called it, a way to contribute to the household while I was unemployed. At first, it seemed reasonable enough. Chores in exchange for meals, a fair trade, but the goalposts kept shifting. The points required for even the most basic necessities, a shower, a piece of fruit, a phone call, kept increasing, while the tasks assigned to me remained menial and time-consuming. It was a deliberate, calculated effort to break me down, to strip me of my dignity and self-worth. And my father, the man who was supposed to protect me, remained silent, complicit in Jeanette's cruel game. The rumble of my stomach brought me back to the present. I couldn't take it anymore. This couldn't be my life. A flicker of defiance ignited within me, a spark of resolve in the darkness. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them break me. I sat up, pulling out a small notebook from under my pillow. It was worn and tattered, filled with scribbled notes and ideas. I began to write, the pen scratching across the paper, a physical manifestation of the plan forming in my mind. It was a long shot, a risky gamble, but it was my only hope. I needed proof, evidence of their systematic abuse. I needed to document everything, every instance of manipulation, every withheld meal, every cruel remark. I'd started keeping a record a few days ago, jotting down notes whenever I could, hiding the notebook away from Jeanette's prying eyes. 1 apple 50 points, I wrote, the words a bitter reminder of the absurd cost of sustenance in this house. Cleaning entire bathroom 25 points. Insufficient for lunch. I continued to write, filling page after page with a detailed account of my daily struggles. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I had to be careful, discreet. Jeanne was always watching, always listening, but I was determined. I had nothing left to lose. The next day, I went through the motions, completing the assigned chores with a quiet efficiency. I washed dishes, vacuumed the carpets, even polished the silver, all the while keeping a mental tally of the points I was accumulating. "See, Bonnie," Jeanne said with a condescending smile, as I handed her the list of completed tasks. "You can be productive when you put your mind to it. She glanced at the list, her smile faltering slightly. I'd managed to earn enough points for a small bowl of soup. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I believe this entitles me to dinner, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in days. There was a flicker of surprise in Jeanette's eyes, a momentary crack in her carefully constructed facade. My father, still hidden behind his newspaper, shifted slightly in his chair. I knew I had to be patient. This was just the beginning. My plan was in motion, the wheels slowly turning, and somewhere, in the back of my mind, a seed of hope began to grow. Maybe, just maybe, I could reclaim my life. I had a feeling this Christmas might be a little different. Rain lashed against the window pane, mirroring the storm raging inside me. I stared out at the distorted streetlights, each flicker a cruel reminder of how my own family had twisted and warped everything I held dear. My own home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. I pulled the thin blanket tight around me, a pathetic shield against the gnawing chill that seemed to seep into my very bones. It wasn't just the cold of the late autumn night. It was the coldness of their calculated cruelty. My husband, the man who had vowed to protect me, had become a stranger. He sat downstairs, probably enjoying the warmth of the fire, oblivious or perhaps deliberately ignorant of the icy wasteland he'd created for his own daughter. I remembered Bonnie as a child, her bright eyes full of laughter, her small hand confidently tucked into mine. She'd been such a vibrant, trusting little girl. Now just the thought of her face, gaunt and shadowed, brought a fresh wave of nausea. I'd seen the way Jeanne, my husband's second wife, looked at her, the barely concealed disdain in her eyes. "She's just lazy," Jeanne had said just last week, her voice dripping with saccharine falsehood. "She needs to learn some responsibility." Responsibility. Bonnie had worked tirelessly, sacrificing her own dreams to support us when my husband's business had faltered. And this was her reward. The responsibility Jeanne spoke of was a cruel charade, a system designed to break Bonnie's spirit. The points system. They called it. Points for chores, points for errands, points for simply existing, points that never seemed to add up to enough for a decent meal, a warm coat, or even a kind word. It was a slow, agonizing starvation, not just of her body, but of her soul. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images that haunted me. Bonnie shivering in her threadbare clothes, her hand trembling as she reached for a meager portion of dinner. The silent tears she tried so hard to hide. How could my husband allow this? He wasn't a cruel man, not inherently, but he was weak, easily swayed by Jeanette's manipulative whispers and the allure of a peaceful home, even if that peace was built on Bonnie's suffering. He had traded his daughter's well-being for his own comfort. I remembered a time, years ago, when he would have defended Bonnie fiercely, when he would have roared with laughter at her silly jokes, when he would have held her close and whispered words of love and encouragement. Where had that man gone? Had Jeanne truly erased him completely, replacing him with this hollow shell of a person? The rain continued to fall, a relentless drumming against the glass. I got out of bed, the cold biting at my exposed skin. I walked to the window and looked out at the darkened street. A single car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the empty road. I imagined Bonnie out there, alone in the world, cast out by the very people who should have loved and protected her. The thought was unbearable. I couldn't stand by and watch this happen any longer. My husband's weakness had allowed this monstrous situation to fester, but my silence had made me complicit. I had to do something, anything, to stop this slow, agonizing destruction of my daughter. A flicker of resolve ignited within me, a small ember of hope in the desolate landscape of my heart. I wouldn't let Shauna win. I wouldn't let my husband's apathy destroy Bonnie. I would find a way to fight back. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. Shauna was too cunning, too skilled at twisting words and manipulating situations to her advantage. My husband, blinded by his desire for a quiet life, would likely dismiss my concerns, labeling me as hysterical or overprotective. I needed to be smarter, more subtle. I needed a plan that would expose their cruelty, a plan that would force them to confront the consequences of their actions, a plan that would bring Bonnie back from the brink. I turned away from the window, the cold no longer feeling quite so bitter. The seed of an idea had been planted, a seed that I knew, with careful nurturing, could blossom into something powerful, something that could change everything. It was a long shot, a risky gamble, but I was willing to bet everything on it. For Bonnie, for the daughter I had failed to protect, for the family I desperately hoped to reclaim. I knew where I needed to start. It was a long shot, but I had to try. The first step was to gather evidence, proof of the systematic cruelty they had inflicted on Bonnie. I would need to be discreet, to move like a shadow in my own home, collecting the pieces of their twisted game, building a case against them. The image of Bonnie, happy and healthy, fueled my resolve. This Christmas, things would be different. This Christmas, I would give Bonnie the greatest gift of all, justice. Weeks blurred into a monotonous, sickening routine. Each morning began with the same chilling ritual. Shauna, perched at the kitchen counter with her ledger and pen, would greet me with a saccharine smile. "Good morning, dear. Ready for your daily points allocation?" It was never a question, always a veiled threat. The initial system, cruel as it was, had at least possessed a semblance of structure. Now, the rules shifted daily, Shaunette's whims dictating my access to basic necessities. "I've decided," she announced one morning, her eyes glinting, "that complaining about the food will now cost you double points." I stared at the meager portion of oatmeal in front of me, my allotted breakfast, and bit back the bitter retort that threatened to escape. "Seems fair," I managed, my voice flat. My stomach growled constantly, a gnawing emptiness that mirrored the hollowness within me. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, every move scrutinized, every word weighed. "Don't forget," Shauna would chirp, "leaving a light on overnight is 5 points, and using more than one towel after a shower, that's 3. She'd smile then, a predatory glint in her eyes, as if enjoying the slow erosion of my spirit. My father, as always, remained a silent observer. He'd sit at the table, newspaper shielding his face, pretending not to hear, not to see. His silence was a betrayal, a constant, throbbing ache in my chest. One evening, I overheard Shauna on the phone, her voice dripping with false concern. "Oh, yes, Bonnie's been struggling a bit. So forgetful these days. Leaving lights on, wasting water, it's quite worrying." She paused, then added with a sigh, "We're just trying to help her get back on track." My blood ran cold. This wasn't about helping me. It was about control, about breaking me down piece by piece. That night, lying in bed, my stomach twisting with hunger, a spark of defiance ignited within me. I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them crush me. I would fight back. My mind raced, piecing together a plan. Jeanette's meticulous record keeping, her obsession with documentation, would be her undoing. I needed proof, concrete evidence of her cruelty. The following days were a blur of calculated moves. I started keeping my own record, meticulously documenting every point deduction, every instance of Jeanette's manipulation. "Jeanne," I'd ask innocently, "could you remind me how many points using the hairdryer costs? I just want to be sure." She'd answer, oblivious to my true intentions, her voice dripping with condescension. I'd carefully note it down, adding it to my growing list. I even started leaving small, insignificant items out of place, waiting for Jeanne to pounce, to add another tally mark to her ledger. Each entry, each carefully recorded instance of her pettiness, fueled my resolve. I knew I needed more than just a written record. I needed something irrefutable, something that would expose her cruelty to the world. Then, one afternoon, as I was sifting through old boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon an old camcorder. It was bulky and outdated, but it worked. This, I realized, was the key. I started filming, documenting everything. Jeanette's condescending remarks, the meager portions of food, the constant scrutiny, all of it was captured on tape. I even managed to film my father's silent complicity, his averted gaze, as Jeanne berated me for some imagined infraction. "Dad," I'd say, holding the camcorder just out of sight, "don't you think this is a bit much?" He'd mumble something noncommittal, his eyes fixed on his newspaper, desperate to avoid the confrontation. Each recording, each captured moment of their cruelty felt like a small victory. The Christmas holidays were approaching, a time that should have been filled with joy and family togetherness. Instead, it was just another opportunity for Jeanne to exert her control. "We'll be having a small gathering this year," she announced. "Just a few close friends." I knew what that meant. More opportunities for her to perform her role as the caring, concerned stepmother, while simultaneously chipping away at my spirit. But this Christmas, things would be different. This Christmas, I would give them a gift they wouldn't soon forget. A gift wrapped in truth, tied with justice, and delivered with a smile. I looked at the camcorder in my hand, the red recording light blinking steadily in the dim attic. My heart pounded with anticipation. The game Jeanne was about to change. Rain lashed against the attic window, mimicking the turmoil inside me. I watched Bonnie from the shadows of the landing, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. She sat hunched over her worn diary at the tiny desk, a single bare bulb casting harsh light on her gaunt face. "Just a few more days," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Just a few more days." My heart ached. Just a few more days of this charade, this cruel, twisted game Jeanne had devised. The point system, she'd called it, a way for Bonnie to earn her keep after losing her job. Earn her keep, as if my own daughter was some stranger off the street. 1 point for doing the dishes, Jeanne had announced brightly at dinner that first week. her smile not quite reaching her eyes. 2 points for vacuuming, 3 for cleaning the bathrooms. She'd even assign points for weeding the garden, a task Bonnie had always enjoyed, turning it into another form of servitude. And Shauna had added, her voice dripping with false sweetness, 5 points for a home-cooked meal, 5 points for cooking a meal in her own home, for her own family. At first, I'd been hesitant, unsure of this new system. Isn't this a bit much, Shauna? I'd asked, trying to keep my voice level. Bonnie's just going through a tough time. Shauna had patted my hand condescendingly. Darling, it's for her own good. It will teach her responsibility. Responsibility. The word echoed in my mind now. A hollow mockery. Bonnie, bless her heart, had thrown herself into the system, desperate to please, to prove her worth. She'd scrubbed floors, polished furniture, cooked elaborate meals, her face pale with exhaustion. She'd even started taking on extra chores, hoping to earn enough points to enjoy a simple treat. A small piece of chocolate, a single scoop of ice cream. Look, Mom, she'd said one evening, her voice thin, a forced cheerfulness clinging to her words. I earned enough points for a movie night. Can we watch something together? I'd wanted to scream, to rip that point chart off the refrigerator and tear it to shreds. But I'd stayed silent, afraid of what Shauna might do, afraid of losing the fragile piece I clung to. But over the past weeks, a chilling realization had begun to dawn on me. This wasn't about responsibility. It wasn't about teaching Bonnie a lesson. It was about control. Pure, unadulterated control. Shauna was systematically breaking Bonnie down, stripping her of her dignity, her self-worth, her very essence. And my silence, my complicity, was making me her unwitting accomplice. I watched as Bonnie carefully filled in her diary, her hand trembling slightly. The diary. My heart leaped. That was it. The key. The revenge. The sweet, sweet revenge I craved. I'd noticed Bonnie meticulously documenting everything, the points she'd earned, the meals she'd been denied, the cruel jabs Shauna disguised as concern. Are you sure you've earned enough points for that apple, dear? Perhaps you should skip dessert tonight. Think of the points you'll save. Each entry a testament to Jeanette's cruelty, a weapon waiting to be unleashed. The following day, I feigned a headache, retreating to my room, leaving Bonnie and Jean alone in the kitchen. I could hear their voices, Jeanette's sharp and condescending, Bonnie's quiet and subdued. Then silence, a tense, pregnant silence, and then the sound I'd been waiting for, the front door slamming shut. Shauna had gone out, leaving Bonnie alone in the house. This was my chance. I crept down the stairs and into the kitchen. Bonnie's diary lay open on the table, a single entry scrawled across the page. Julian called. He's coming for Christmas. Julian, Bonnie's fiancé, a kind, gentle soul who adored her, a beacon of hope in the darkness that had enveloped our home. Christmas. It was just a few weeks away. Perfect. A slow smile spread across my face. The pieces were falling into place. Jeanette's meticulously crafted facade of the perfect family, the holiday cheer she so painstakingly cultivated each year, it would all come crashing down. And I, the silent, complicit wife, would be the one to bring it all down. I picked up the diary, my fingers tracing the words Bonnie had written. This wasn't just a diary. It was a weapon I would wield with precision and devastating effect. Shauna wanted control. She wanted a perfect Christmas. I would give her a Christmas she would never forget. A Christmas where the truth, raw and ugly, would be laid bare for all to see. And Julian, dear, sweet Julian, would be our unwitting guest of honor. Christmas Eve, the scent of roasting turkey, usually a comfort, felt like a cruel mockery. You're not earning your keep, Bonnie. Jeanette's voice, sharp as broken glass, cut through the festive air. No dinner for you tonight. Julian shifted uncomfortably beside me, his eyes darting between Jeanette and the laden table. I forced a smile, a bitter taste rising in my throat. It's fine, Julian. I'm not that hungry. Lies. I was starving, not just for food, but for respect, for love, for the family I thought I had. I excused myself, the weight of their judgment heavy on my shoulders, and retreated to my room. The charade was over. Tonight, everything changed. My phone, clutched in my hand, felt like a lifeline. Over the past few weeks, I'd meticulously documented everything. Every snide remark, every withheld meal, every point deducted for imagined infractions. The camera roll held a damning record of Jeanette's cruelty, a stark contrast to the perfect family image she projected to the world. I reviewed the footage one last time, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. Enough was enough. Downstairs, the festive chatter continued, oblivious to the storm brewing above. I took a deep breath and walked back into the dining room. All eyes turned to me. Jeanette, a smug smile playing on her lips, raised an eyebrow. Decided to join us, Bonnie. Perhaps you've reconsidered your lifestyle choices. Her words dripped with condescension. Actually, Jeanette, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I have something to share with everyone. I connected my phone to the large television that dominated the room. The festive Christmas scenes on screen replaced by the stark reality of my hidden camera footage. The room fell silent as the first clip played. Jeanette's voice, sharp and accusatory, echoed through the room, berating me for breathing too loudly. The next clip showed her discarding a plate of food meant for me, a cruel smirk on her face. Clip after clip, the truth unfolded, exposing the calculated cruelty that had become my daily life. Julian's face went pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. My father, initially dismissive, slowly began to absorb the weight of the evidence. His face, usually jovial, hardened with a mixture of shame and anger. He turned to Jeanette, his voice low and dangerous. Jeanette, is this true, Jeanette? Her composure finally shattered, stammered. It's not how it looks. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but there was none. The evidence was irrefutable. The festive atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a thick tension. The smell of the roast turkey, once tantalizing, now seemed to hang heavy in the air, a symbol of the feast I had been denied, of the love and acceptance I had craved. I think it's exactly how it looks, Jeanette, I said, my voice filled with a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. My father stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked at Jeanette, his disappointment palpable. I don't know what to say. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and regret. Bonnie, He trailed off, unable to find the words. I didn't need his words. The truth was out. The charade was over, and I finally was free. I looked at Julian, his face a mask of shock and disgust. He reached for my hand, his touch tentative. Bonnie, I had no idea. I gently pulled my hand away. No, I said, my voice soft but firm. You didn't. I picked up my small bag, the only possession I had left. Merry Christmas, I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. Then I turned and walked out, leaving them to grapple with the wreckage of their lives. I didn't look back. I knew what awaited me wasn't just freedom from their cruelty, but something far greater, something they could never take away, something they would never have. Christmas morning. The tree glittered, laden with ornaments, a stark contrast to the chill that had settled between us. Shauna, dressed in a festive red sweater, smiled brightly at the assembled family. Isn't it wonderful? Everyone together for Christmas, she chirped, her voice dripping with false cheer. I made sure there was plenty of everything this year. She glanced at me, her smile tightening. Plenty for those who deserve it. Of course. I met her gaze, my heart pounding, a small, tightly wrapped box clutched in my hand. This charade was finally ending. My father, oblivious as always, beamed. Yes, Jeanette's outdone herself. A real feast. He patted his ample stomach, a testament to Jeanette's generosity. Bonnie, dear, are you going to join us? He asked, gesturing towards the laden table. I forced a smile. In a moment, father. I have something to share with everyone first. My voice was steady, stronger than I felt. Julian, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand. His presence was a rock in the swirling storm of my emotions. He knew everything. He'd seen the point system, the dwindling portions, the carefully orchestrated starvation Jeanne disguised as concern for my health. He'd witnessed my slow descent into despair, the constant gnawing hunger, the emotional toll of being treated like a prisoner in my own home. A Christmas present, Jeanne trilled, her eyes glittering with something that wasn't quite festive cheer. How lovely! But don't tell me, let it be a surprise. She reached for a mimosa, her hand trembling slightly. It is a surprise, I agreed, my voice calm. A surprise for everyone. I held up the small box. This, Shauna, is for you. Her smile faltered. Oh, you shouldn't have, she murmured, extending a hesitant hand. I insist, I said, placing the box in her palm. Open it. Shauna tore off the wrapping paper, revealing a plain wooden box. She lifted the lid, her face paling as she stared at the contents. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a small, leather-bound notebook. What is this? She stammered, her eyes darting to my father. It's my diary, I said, my voice rising slightly. A record of the past few months, a record of the point system you so diligently implemented. A gasp rippled through the room. My father's face crumpled in confusion. Point system? What's Bonnie talking about? Jeanette's eyes were wide with panic. It's nothing, dear. Just a little game we were playing. Her voice cracked. A game, I repeated, my voice laced with ice. A game where I earn points for doing chores, for behaving appropriately, for not burdening the family. A game where those points determined how much food I was allowed to eat. My father stared at me, his face ashen. Shauna, is this true? Shauna opened her mouth, then closed it again. Words failed her. I turned to my Aunt Carol and Uncle Michael, who had arrived earlier that morning. They looked stunned, their festive smiles wiped away. Aunt Carol, Uncle Michael, did you know that Shauna limited my meals? That she weighed my food and measured my portions? That I was constantly hungry, always on the verge of collapse? Their silence was deafening. I opened the diary, my hands shaking slightly. Day 15. Lost another 2 pounds. Feeling faint and dizzy. Shauna said I'm not trying hard enough to earn points. Day 22. Denied dinner because I talked back. Stomach cramping from hunger. Cried myself to sleep. Day 30. Christmas is coming. Shauna bought a huge turkey. Wonder if I'll be allowed more than a few bites. I closed the diary, my voice thick with emotion. This, I said, holding up the book, is the truth behind Jeanette's perfect Christmas facade. My father looked from me to Jeanne, his eyes filled with disbelief and dawning horror. He turned to Julian. Julian, is this what you've been telling me? Julian nodded, his face grim. I tried to warn you, sir. I saw what was happening to Bonnie. My father rose to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. He faced Jonna, his voice trembling with rage. You starved my daughter on Christmas. Jonna shrank back, her face contorted in a mixture of fear and anger. It wasn't like that. I was just trying to help her. She was gaining weight, becoming unruly. Unruly, I scoffed. I was desperate, Shauna. Desperate for food, for kindness, for a semblance of normalcy in my own home. The room was silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Then my father spoke, his voice low and heavy with pain. Shauna, I think it's best you leave. Jeanette's eyes widened in disbelief. Leave? But it's Christmas. I don't care, my father said, his voice hardening. Get out of my house, and don't ever come back. The look on Jeanette's face as she gathered her things, the stunned silence of my relatives, the look of quiet support in Julian's eyes. It was the best Christmas present I could have asked for. I had finally reclaimed my voice, my dignity, my life. And as I looked at my father, finally seeing the truth reflected in his eyes, I knew that this Christmas, we were finally a family again.